Hey y'all, we've got some new listeners around these parts. So before I dive into today's episode, I wanted to just real quick tell you about a free training that my friend Nicole Ricardo put together exclusively for listeners of the Unclassical Musician. You probably recognize Nicole from a few episodes back when I interviewed her, and I just wanted to let you know that we did a free training together for y'all, breaking down Nicole's whole system on how to consistently sell out your offers using Instagram, whether that's booking more private lessons, masterclasses, concerts, selling merch, all of these, whatever it is you are doing, making money at, you can do it on Instagram without needing a massive audience. Y'all know me. I'm hanging out with my 1100 best friends over here. It's a good time. You do not need to be an influencer in order to make money on Instagram. So Nicole's literally walking you through step by step her 4-part sell out your offer system. And at the end, she will also tell you more about her course, the Instagram Marketing and Sales Academy, because y'all, if you're trying to book more students or sell literally anything, you want to be using Instagram as a marketing tool in your business, and you need to learn how to do it. I'm in the course, and I'm telling you, this is not Googleable information. Nicole's been at this for a long time now. I consider her to be an expert in the flute world on this stuff. She has a wealth of knowledge, and honestly, the value of the bonuses in this course is worth the cost of the course. If you ask me, like, just the bonuses. Like, it's a really good value. Your ROI, if you choose to sign up for the course, is going to be ridiculous over the course of your career, because this is stuff that you can continue to apply for years to come, as long as you're on Instagram, most likely. And Nicole updates the stuff when Instagram makes changes, which is great. So, like, once you're in, you always have access to the course, and you're always going to have that new knowledge coming through, which is great. Some of you were asking about that training way back when, and weren't able to come. This is your opportunity to view it now. So the link is going to be in the show notes if you are interested in checking that out. And if you have any questions at all about the Instagram Marketing and Sales Academy, feel free to reach out to either Nicole or myself. We'd be happy to answer those questions for you. And here's the rest of the episode. Hey there! My name is Tori Lupinek, and you are listening to The Unclassical Musician, the podcast empowering the new generation of classical musicians to take risks and live a fulfilling life. Each week, we dive in headfirst into a topic on the minds of young professional musicians and come out the other side with a new perspective on life as an artist. Hello and welcome to the last installment of Mental Health Month here on The Unclassical Musician. I hope y'all have been enjoying this month's content. I really have. And for our last episode for May today, I'm excited to bring you this convo with flutist and New World Symphony fellow Leah Stevens. So if you don't know Leah, she is obviously a flutist with the New World Symphony in Miami, and she also plays with the Owensboro Symphony in Kentucky. And as an orchestral musician, she has been principal flute with the Orchestra Now, and she's also played with the Civic Orchestra in Chicago, the Cities Symphony, South Bend Symphony, and the Lexington Philharmonic. In the flute world, you probably know her from winning first prize in the NFA's Orchestral excerpt competition and second prize in the Piccolo orchestral excerpt competition in the same NFA convention. Like, what? That was in Minneapolis. So she won the Orchestral Audition Masterclass and then second in the Piccolo Orchestral Excerpt Audition Masterclass. Like, don't know how often that actually happens. But I know Leah because she started her artist or performer certificate at DePaul the year after I left. So we just missed each other. But I've been following her on social media since like about that time, and I graduated in 2015. So it's been a while. And I remember in my master's that Leah was the only flutist that I knew of who was completely open and honest about her struggles with her mental health on social media. I so admire that. Like, I admired it then, her honesty and being vulnerable with people who, like, she doesn't know. And now, even more so, because, like, I mean, she's been doing it, like, she's been doing the mental health thing since before it was cool, right? We all know that, like, the last year, mental health and mental health awareness, especially in the music world, has shot up since we've all been having to deal with the coronavirus. And so I really applaud Leah for her vulnerability and putting herself out there. And we're going to talk a lot about that in this conversation today. A little bit about how being that open about it on Instagram was kind of a way to hold herself accountable for her own progress. But we have a lot of things that we're going to cover, including how music school was a contributing factor to some of her struggles and how things have changed from before the pandemic to during the pandemic and now, like, thinking about what's going to happen after the pandemic. It's a really good conversation. I hope y'all enjoy it. And without further ado, here's Leah Stevens.
Hey.
Hi, Leah. How are you?
How are you? I'm alive.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you sound great.
Okay. Yeah, making sure, because I'm still figuring out this Blue Yeti, and sometimes it just doesn't like to work. Anyway.
Yeah, no, it sounds good to me. So you're like super, you've got a lot going on because this is like the last week at New World right now.
Yeah, I mean, we're just working on the Ives 3 places in New England, and luckily MTT canceled one of our rehearsals tomorrow, so thank God. I mean, we're doing really well, but yeah, it's the final stretch.
Yeah. Like how much do you have left at this point?
Rehearsal, what's today? Wednesday. Rehearsal Friday, and then dress rehearsal Saturday, concert Saturday night, and then we're having some sort of like socially distanced gathering on Sunday, and I'm leaving to go back to Illinois on Monday.
Oh, wow. So yeah, this is like the final stretch.
Yeah.
Oh, good for you. And then, so this is your second year at New World, right?
Yes.
Are you going back next year?
I am. Yeah. Luckily, with the pandemic, New World decided to sort of freeze everyone's fellowships. So I was a second year this year. I will be a second year again next year.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it sucks that of course, you finally made it, and then the pandemic kind of threw a wrench in your works, but now you get extra time, which is awesome.
Yeah, I'm really, really grateful we've got that extra time.
That's you're very lucky, and I know that you you feel how lucky you are.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come on this show and take time out of your busy schedule to talk to me for a little bit today. I know you got a lot going on.
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all. I'm really excited to be here.
Honestly, so I was looking at my like list of people that I would like to have on the show at some point and just like trying to figure out May, like what the schedule for the podcast was going to be. And all of a sudden I like saw this theme with a few people that I wanted to have on, and it was like, oh, this is all kind of like mental health related and like mindset related stuff. Had no idea that May was Mental Health Awareness Month,
Surprise.
actually. Like, wow, this worked out perfectly. So thank you. This is poignant.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I always like to start off the show, like I'm going to read a little bio about you in your intro, but in your own words. Can you please tell the people a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your backstory, of what you've been doing for work during the pandemic and stuff like that?
Of course. Well, my name is Leah Stevens. I am a flute fellow with the New World Symphony, and I was recently appointed the second and assistant principal flutist of the Owensboro Symphony in Kentucky. Interestingly enough, I won't be playing with Owensboro until June. That's when they're finally starting concerts back up, which is kind of wild to me because I won the job back in October. So yeah, a little bit weird. But yeah, during this pandemic, it's been really difficult not having performance opportunities. And I am grateful that we were able to come back to New World in January. We had been operating completely virtually up until that point. And it's been strange. We're getting our weekly COVID tests, and I think we're only allowed to play like one piece per week, just so they can keep all the personnel like locked in their own pods, just in case someone gets sick. But normal is starting to return little by little.
This is good. Good. And congratulations on the job. I'm glad that you're finally going to get to start playing.
I'm very excited. Yes.
So how's that worked out with having pods at New Worlds? Do you think that's been like an efficient way to stay safe since January?
Honestly, absolutely. It has. And this isn't to say that we haven't been able to hang out with friends or anything like that. Current protocol states that I think you can only have 4 people in your apartment at once, and they have to be socially distanced. But in terms of anyone getting sick at work, I think since January, not one person has gotten COVID at work.
Wow.
I think. You can't quote me on that. I remember getting one email a few weeks ago saying that someone who tested positive accessed the building, but it wasn't a fellow. Wow. That's all I know.
That's amazing.
Yeah, truly amazing.
And just to say, like, that just goes to show that, like, everyone there is being really responsible, and because if one person gets sick, then that ruins it for everyone.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we've also, like I said, friend groups are still hanging out, but we're trying to be as responsible as possible. And at the same time, our mental health collectively is struggling a little bit. So at least my group of friends, we've taken space from each other a lot more often than we usually do. And it's been helpful.
That's good. Yeah, just like listening to what everyone needs in order to just like make it all the way through to the end without any mistakes happening last minute.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So Leah, I've been following you on Instagram since my first year of my master's, which was your first year at DePaul. And you have been by far one of the most open and honest young professional musicians online when it comes to your personal struggles with mental health. And I really, like, in hindsight now, like now during the pandemic, everyone, like, we're all being a lot more open and honest about like mental health and how important it is to like take care of yourself and seek help when you need it. But that wasn't a thing 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
You're very right. It was not.
So I applaud you for that because you were doing the thing when no one else was doing it.
Yeah, that's true. And, I've had moments where people, I've found, I'm not going to name names because honestly, I couldn't recall names at this point, but it almost seems like some people bring up mental health struggles for clout now. And I do think about how I was being absolutely open and vulnerable 5 years ago. I mean, I was doing it for myself because I knew I couldn't admit it to myself, or rather, I knew I couldn't really admit it to myself if I didn't admit it to other people. So I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah.
And, the pandemic hasn't changed that. It's interesting that you mentioned DePaul because, like, I know, you graduated from DePaul before I got there, but I only spent a year there, and that is largely due in part to some toxicity. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that was I made that decision. I was there from 2016 to 2017, and I made the decision to drop out in 2017. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do.
Yeah. I mean, because you were doing the artist diploma, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the performer certificate, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Which is like a whole nother thing there.
Yeah. And it was especially frustrating because I was more on the orchestral track. So I was trying to take auditions while still going to rehearsal, and that didn't work out very well. And that's probably the largest reason I decided to leave, is that I wasn't being allowed to pursue what I needed to pursue.
And you were not the only person who felt that way at that time. I can promise you that. Yeah.
Oh, I know.
So this was like 5 years ago. You were being very open about your mental health stuff on Instagram. Like, because you suffer from anxiety and depression, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so how long have you had these feelings? Like, was this something that was brought on like as a result of being in music school, or is this something that you had like when you were a kid and then you went to school and maybe made things a little bit worse?
I mean, if I'm really being honest, looking back on my childhood, yeah, I had things that contributed to negative impacts on my mental health, but I never really addressed it. And, the whole idea in my family was, just muscle through it. So I was content to muscle through it, and I did fine for a while. When I got to graduate school, I remember this moment. I was sitting in my bedroom trying to get ready. I was going to go meet a friend at a coffee house for like another one of our friends had her jazz trio and she was playing. And I remember sitting there on the bed and I'm just like crying and crying and I don't know why. And I texted my friend and I'm like, I can't bring myself to leave the apartment. And at that time he was, he had told me about his struggles and being on the medication he was on and how it was helping him. But he said something along the lines of, please just come and I know you'll feel better. And having that sort of understanding, looking back on it, I understand how important that was. At the time, I was just like trying to push myself through it. But where it really started to unravel was before I moved to Chicago in 2016, I had just been released from my internship. I had worked at a biomedical research company for 9 months, I think, at that point. And I was released. I got a temp job because I couldn't go 3 months without income. And that job was one of the most toxic environments I had ever been in. I had salaried employees who were not my boss spying on me, making sure that I was working.
Oh, gosh.
And whenever I would go get snacks in the break room, they would, ask me, why are you eating all that when you just ate a salad for lunch? Shit like that.
What?
Yeah. Completely inappropriate. Completely inappropriate. But that is when I first started to really wrestle with anxiety, and it would happen at night where I would try to fall asleep and then my body would shock itself awake and I was not getting sleep. I went to the ER twice and it was absolutely like it was devastating to me because I was like, I have no idea what the hell's going on. And the second ER visit, the doctor was nice enough to prescribe me Ativan. So I had that at least. But when I moved to Chicago in July of 2016, I remember just like having a complete breakdown. And, you know, my husband would go off to work at his new job and I would sit at home just staring at the wall crying for hours. And at that point, it's like, I knew something needed to change. I knew I needed to get help because otherwise, like, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. Wow, this just got really deep.
It's good though. It's good though. I appreciate it very much because I don't know who needs to hear it, but somebody needs to hear it and know that they're not alone in feeling the way that they're feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. But I was just like, damn, that's okay.
So you think that having a non-music, not necessarily having a non-music job, but having a non-music job in a toxic work environment was kind of like what started to push things over the edge.
Absolutely. And I don't necessarily think that non-music was the issue. I mean, okay, yeah, it's really stressful to have a 40-hour-a-week job and then come home and practice. Like,
oh yeah,
I'm still not sure how I did it, but it's just having that toxic work environment. And I remember being very surprised when I got to DePaul that I was starting to see the similarities. And that was very, very disheartening because, like, I had moved to Chicago to study with Mark Sparks and we had great rapport. Like, I did not leave DePaul because of him. Like, I was really upset about having to leave because I enjoyed our lessons so much and I grew so much with him. But, you know, it's just sad when you think that something is going to be so good for you and amazing, and then the rug is ripped out right from under you.
Oh yeah, so it's so disappointing.
Yeah.
I feel that. I feel that when I moved 3,000 miles away to Alaska and then came back after like less than 3 months. Yeah, it's a lot. I do not blame you at all, but especially when you're so like emotionally involved with your work, you know, and like that's the golden ticket, like getting to study at DePaul for the performer certificate and then boop.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really had to learn at that point. I mean, I was pretty good about handling rejection up until that point. I just accepted it as a fact of life in this industry. But I really had to learn to compartmentalize my abilities as a musician from who I am as a person. Otherwise, I wouldn't have survived up until this point. I just wouldn't. And I honestly don't understand how people don't separate the two. Not that they can't, because it's very difficult to do, but when people consciously choose not to. Like, I feel their anxiety and it scares me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people like when you've been in music school for so long, you know, that and you've like not taken time off and you've just been a music student for so long, and for so many of us it's like the thing that we've done for a long time, that when you're finally out in the real quote unquote real world and you have to like do adult things and also like be a partner and a friend and a daughter and like all of this other stuff, when you realize that like my worth, like my self-worth as a person is not tied up in my self-worth as a musician, that's probably one of the healthiest things that you can do for your brain, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And, you know, thinking about that sort of self-worth and thinking about identity, it's like you're so wrapped up in your identity as a student, being in school for that long, taking lessons for that long, that when you finally get out, and like when I finally left DePaul and launched myself into professional life, it's really scary. For the first few months, I was like, I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to do. Like, I'm applying where I can and I have no idea. we're on my husband's source of income right now, and this is really terrifying.
Oh, yeah, that would be stressful for anybody, right?
Yeah, and we don't really talk about that with young professionals or students that are just about to enter the real world. Like, we don't really talk about that sort of stress. And I wish someone had talked with me about that, and I wouldn't have been as scared to, take the leap.
I think that for all of the teachers and musicians who have ever said, it's like being a musician is hard work. It's hard. Like, they all said that. They all said that it wasn't easy. But I don't think that anyone ever said, like, no one ever got, like, I never got a list of specific things, like, why it's hard.
Yeah, me neither. Honestly, my undergrad was spent with my teacher telling me this route that you want to take isn't easy and you got to work your ass off. And every single lesson, like, she pushed and she pushed and she pushed, and I wouldn't be here today without her. But that's all I thought about, is that, okay, my talent isn't at the level that it needs to be, so I'm just going to keep practicing. I didn't think about everything else. I had some sort of awareness that, oh yeah, it's hard to make a living in music because there aren't very many jobs, but I'll figure it out. And then when you finally get there, you're like, oh God.
Yeah.
Oh God.
I mean, I think a lot of people maybe even think of it as though, like, if you were to tell your parents that you wanted to start a band when you were in high school and you're like not going to go to college because you want to do the band thing and you want to move to LA and you want to make it work, like we knew that, like, being a musician was like going to be something that is competitive.
Yeah.
But not to the certain extent that we are experiencing, especially after, like, the economy rebuilt itself and then it was doing so well, and then COVID happened, and now it's just a whole different ball game than this nice,
Right.
comfortable 10 years that we had with good culture and symphonies not bailing as much as they were before.
Right.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
but so we talked a little bit about how, like, you were sort of using Instagram as like some accountability for you to, like, just be honest about your struggles, because if you weren't being honest about it with something, then you weren't going to be able to be honest with yourself about it.
Right.
And now your Instagram is immortalized online, right? And
Sure. It's weird to think about.
I know. And I ask this question of some of my guests sometimes, especially the very real ones, quote unquote, like real people on Instagram or social media in general. Do you ever worry, or have you ever worried that someday some higher up somewhere is going to Google your name and find your Instagram and maybe not give you a job because they judge you negatively based on that?
I mean, first of all, I think that, at a young age, or rather, excuse me, and when you start in undergrad, your teachers constantly tell you, be careful what you post online because someone might see it and someone might have an opinion. And I think we think about that too much. It's like, why aren't we thinking about the fact that someone is judging me based on me being a person?
Mm-hmm.
Why do I have to change myself to make them more comfortable?
Mm-hmm.
So thinking of that, like, if some higher up or some famous musician decides that I'm not worth working with because of me discussing my mental health struggles or trying to be actively anti-racist, actively feminist, and speaking out about these issues, then, it sucks, but I don't want to work with them anyway. And I think that particular issue, like, it's going to start dying out when people of that generation retire and our younger generation takes over. And it sucks having to, like, wait on that.
Yeah. But I absolutely agree. And everyone I've asked that question to has basically said the same thing. Like, if someone is judging me negatively for it, then that's not the kind of person that I would want to work with anyways.
Right. And it's their problem, not mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is good. And I do think that like the last year or so, everything that has happened in the United States, that there are some I have listeners from like different countries and I did not know that.
Cool.
Yeah. But everything that's happened in the United States in the last year, it's like it has impacted everyone, whether you like it or not. And you can go ahead and just be a real human about it. Or you can like hide it away inside and pretend like everything is fine when really nothing is 100% fine unless you're in the top 1%. But then even they are not 100% fine because they're like, well, someone's going to try to figure out how they can tax me and pay my fair share of taxes, and they're not happy about that either.
Oh, heaven forbid. Heaven forbid billionaires pay their fair share.
God. And if I swear to God, if I get one person who listens to this episode and says something about that line that I just said, I'm just
It's like, sure, okay, I just want to talk. Sit down, I just want to talk.
Yeah, jeez. Oh, okay, so the pandemic. So let's take it back to like 18 months ago, like solidly like before all of this happened. I know it was a long time.
Wow.
Long time ago.
Thinking about it, it's wow. Anyway.
I know. So we're okay. 18 months ago, you were at New World.
Yes.
And how did how does your, well, I'll say did, your depression and anxiety impact your everyday life as a professional musician before the pandemic?
I mean, you know, my main symptom of depression, actually, it's not like most people think it's just being sad and laying in bed and not being able to function. But for me, it's physical exhaustion.
Mm.
So having to navigate depression and still be a professional musician where they're putting us on a 20+ hour a week rehearsal schedule, not factoring in any required meetings or projects or anything like that. I can't tell you how many hours I've spent napping because it just takes it out of me. And I have to end up putting myself first. Up until about, I would say, January of 2020, I was trying to do it all. I thought that I had to do it all. And whenever people in admin would ask me to do something, I'd have to do it. And I sat down with one of my mentors and she's like, you can actually say no. It may seem like you can't, but you can. And that's when I just started to push back and really take stock of everything. But it's hard. Even now, when I'm not doing 20 hours a week and I'm only going to rehearsal for an hour and a half a day, it's hard. And I've really, in the past year, I've had to really practice setting boundaries and holding boundaries. Because some people, they're just going to try and take advantage.
Mm-hmm. That's good that you had someone to tell you that you can say no. Like, you can.
It wasn't like an internal thing where I was like, oh, what are they going to think of me? It was more, I don't think I have the option to say no. If I say no, I think I'm going to get in trouble. That's going to jeopardize my fellowship, which in some ways that's even worse.
So you felt like you had to say yes to everything based on the environment that you were in.
Yes.
And I think, like in many ways, that's just a holdover from what our teachers taught us, that like you have to say yes to every gig because you never know like which gig is going to be your last, or you're only as good as your last gig, and you have to say yes to everything so you can meet more people, so you can get more gigs.
That, and you have to take every audition you can because jobs are so few and far between. And I am starting to really sit with that now, as auditions are going to start being rescheduled. I was on track to do, between January of 2020 and May of 2020, I was on track to do 6 auditions.
Ooh. Wow.
Yeah, I was going to push myself to do it. And now I'm really taking a step back and I'm like, okay, there are going to be so many of these openings. Is there anywhere I don't really want to live? And if so, maybe I shouldn't take that audition because I just don't have a good feeling about it. And I'm learning to be okay with that.
Yes, I think you should be more than okay with that because like if some town in the middle of nowhere wants really good people to play in their part-time orchestra, then like you got to like throw them a bone and make it worth it for them to come, you know?
Yeah, that and just thinking about, and these jobs that I was auditioning for, these are all salaried positions, like salaried with benefits positions in top orchestras. And, I'm just sitting here, I'm like, okay, I know the audition track record for this particular group, and they've gone how many years with each audition being a no hire. Is this something I really want to spend my time doing? And a lot of people in my position wouldn't think about that because they'd be like, oh, well, it's a job.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, but maybe it's just my experience on the corporate side. It's like, okay, but is it worth it for me to engage in that sort of environment? I don't know if any of that made sense, but
No, it did. It definitely did.
okay.
And I think that before the pandemic, it was very much like, yeah, you if there's a job open, if you're serious about getting a job, you got to go and you got to take every single audition that you possibly can. And I don't know, maybe it's because I'm older or maybe it's because of the pandemic and there haven't been auditions, but now it's like I kind of have to be like more realistic about where I'm going to go to take an audition and how much money I'm going to pay to take the audition and how long the list is. Do I actually have the time to prepare it? And if I did win the job, which would be awesome, but then I would have a 1 year probationary period and then would I uproot my fiance
Right.
slash husband to go with me for 1 year and then maybe not get to keep the job?
Yeah, it's a lot to consider. And I've been in the same boat considering that as well. And all roads point to, okay, this is going to be difficult until I can achieve tenure. And even then, it might be difficult after. So, shit out of luck.
Yeah, it is a hard life. It is a hard life, as we have said.
Yep.
So during the pandemic, with your so you weren't at New World until January of this year. How has the pandemic affected your mental health, both as a person, but then also as a musician?
Very, very, very badly.
Mm.
Just gonna be honest. During the pandemic, that is the most I've ever been depressed in my life.
Oh.
There were many days I would take multiple naps a day. Many days I wouldn't brush my teeth or brush my
Mm.
hair or change my clothes. And it was also a little stressful. And not a lot of people talk about this, so I'm going to plug it. But it's stressful when your spouse or even when your kids are home 24/7 with you. It's
Mm-hmm.
like nobody gets married or has children with the intention to be around them 24/7,
Mm-hmm.
because if you want to be a whole ass person, you have to be a whole ass person away from everything else. And as much as I love my husband, he was also working from home at the time, and it was overwhelming for both of us because we weren't necessarily getting even a little bit of space from each other. So that affected my mental health too. And it's like, oh, great, everything's shut down. I can't exactly go anywhere. Or I can just go to the parking lot at the park nearby and just like sit and stare. And yes, that's engaging. No, like, but, having life come to a halt at the beginning of the pandemic, I was thinking I'd be out of work for a month. That's what we
Mm-hmm.
were planning on. And I was like, okay, this is going to be a great reprieve because Lord knows I need a break.
Mm-hmm.
And then it extended and it extended. And everything blew up with George Floyd's murder and active anti-racism efforts. Finally, it shouldn't have taken this long.
Mm-hmm.
Everything blew up with Donald Trump being Donald Trump,
mm-hmm.
and the election and the insurrection. And it's like that it created a perfect storm.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm still here. I'm still alive. My own personal safety was never brought into question, but straight up, I was straight up not having a good time.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. It's like we haven't been able to catch a break yet. It's just been like it's been a long time of just like thing after thing after thing. And I was sitting on the couch last night. I was like, when's the last time I actually thought about Donald Trump? And the answer was no. It's a good thing like that I can't remember the last time I thought about Donald Trump, right? I feel like that's probably progress to a certain extent.
Oh yeah, having a president in office who doesn't whine on Twitter every day.
Yeah.
And we don't have to we don't see a headline with President Biden's name and think, oh my God, what did he do this time?
Yeah.
It truly, on Inauguration Day, you could feel the whole country breathe a sigh of relief.
Yes.
But anyway, if I talk anymore about this is going to turn into a political shit show. And
well, I will say though, a lot of people, whether they're vocal about being around their family 24/7 for the first part of this pandemic, I felt that too. Especially when you live in a big city and you have a small apartment and both of you are working from home. And yeah, like you said, no one is meant to be around, as much as you love the person, you're not expected to be around them 24/7,
Right. No one gets into these life-altering commitments with the expectation that your entire life is going to revolve around it. Well, actually, that's not necessarily true, because I think young people's version of idea of marriage is a little bit skewed, but that's a whole other topic for another time.
Yeah. It might be, yes, I can't imagine anything better than staying in our small apartment with you 24/7 for 6 months. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah. And then 2 weeks later, you're like, I am going to kill someone.
Okay, so now things are looking up. There's light at the end of the tunnel as more people get vaccinated. States are opening up. Restaurants are opening up. This is all good things. Hopefully classical music will be coming back in person. Maybe not full on, but it will be back. Mm-hmm. How do you think that coming out of the pandemic is going to impact the overall mental health, but maybe also mindset of people, creatives, administrations within the classical music industry?
I think individual creatives are going to have a major mindset shift, and they're going to understand themselves better and what they need to make them a whole person and to make them the most effective they can be in their field. I wish I could say the same for orchestra administration. I really do, because I think this pandemic has taught them a lot of hard lessons, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough for them to actually make lasting, meaningful change. I think there's a lot of things we could do differently in terms of, here at New World. I won't get too much into it, but there's a lot of things we can do differently to ensure the mental health of our musicians, our employees. And once everything goes back to normal, I'm thinking that that's all going to get swept under the rug, because everyone's going to be so happy that things are back to normal. And they aren't necessarily going to realize that, hey, this standard of normal was not good for people. Mm-hmm. The standard of freelancers having to hustle or else they'll be out on their ass. That's not normal. Mm-hmm. Being overworked and underpaid, not normal. We shouldn't be going back to that. So I have to say I'm not terribly optimistic, and I so want to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you for sure. I definitely, like, right now, everyone's like, oh, this is a great, like, hard reset button. Like, we can open back up and we can do things the way that they should have been done for so long, you know. But then once things do start to open back up, everyone's just going to be like, oh my gosh, yay, things are back to normal. And the back to normal is not the thing that everyone necessarily needs.
This could be a major reset button, especially for our economy, our government, the way things are run. But I don't think it's going to be, and that's really, really unfortunate.
So the best thing that we can do is to not forget that these are the things that are important that need to change.
Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. I believe that's the quote.
Yes.
And yeah, a pandemic is pretty formative, and it would be a real tragedy if people forgot about it.
I can't imagine forgetting about it, honestly.
Right. Right. Like, this is going to go into history books. Our children are going to be reading this and they'll be like, oh my God, how'd you handle it? And it's like, not well. Thank you for asking.
And then they have this entire podcast that they can go listen to if they want to hear about how their grandmother dealt with the pandemic.
Yeah.
Jeez. Okay, so we are being realistic. We are not being optimistic.
Yeah. We are being realistic. We want to be optimistic and hopeful, but you know, if in the end I'm proven wrong, then hell yes. Like, I want to be proven wrong about this. I really do. I'm just trying not to get my hopes up.
Yeah. In a perfect world, what would you want to see from the classical music industry at whatever level you want to go to in terms of mental health and taking better care of musicians?
Well, I think it starts at the private lesson level at a younger age, knowing how to push your students and get them to practice and be better, but to not have them feel like a piece of garbage because they missed a note in a lesson, or because they're not as good as they're expected to be. And it's not necessarily about removing expectation, but it's removing that sort of negative stigma. And I think from there, you know, making sure that students' work is valued, young professionals' work is valued, making sure that those in per service orchestras are still able to make as much of a living wage as possible. I'm not saying, like, this is not my opinion on any of the places I work, but it's just a thought. I think that finances and mental health actually go hand in hand. And if your finances are kind of resolved and you're being taken care of, you can focus more energy on taking care of yourself. But we absolutely need to change the culture in classical music to something more positive for growth, rather than beating ourselves up in the practice room every single day, beating ourselves up in rehearsal for missing a note. I mean, I even had that moment today. Like, I came in wrong and the conductor looked at me funny, and I was just like, wow, if looks could kill. But you know, I've had to practice a lot to be like, I'm human and shit happens, deal with it.
Yeah.
That, I cannot state enough how much practice that takes, but it's not, long-term change is not going to be achieved unless we start being honest with ourselves about that and start to lead by example. And it is so difficult to do, and some days you don't have the energy to do it. Believe me, I know. But you can't expect meaningful change to happen if you don't actively try to change.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned how like having a certain level of income goes hand in hand with your mental health. And actually, just like, I mean, if you want to be like my therapist for just like 2 seconds, because this is something that I've been working on with her. There's something going on with my worth as a human being tied up with how much money I make as a musician, which is definitely not true. And I know that that is not true. But there's something around like, I've had this much schooling, I've had this much experience, I know I'm good, and like people like me, and I am loved, and I deserve to make more than X amount of dollars.
That's a huge thing. And a
Hmm.
lot of people, I mean, I get it. I have 2 degrees, I have 2 jobs, I have competition wins under my belt. I know that I am a fantastic player. And God damn it, I should be making more money. I
Hmm.
should. Like, it's very easy to look at that objectively and then very subtly tie that to your self-worth because you just think it's like, am I really not worth more than this to you?
Yeah.
Like, it's very easy. It's completely understandable why someone would feel that way.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Man, I hope I don't get fired for what I've been saying.
I mean, as you said though, it's like if they want to fire you for it, then maybe it's not the place that you want to be working anyway.
That's true. I'm just hoping to avoid awkward conversations because usually those awkward conversations turn out very not good because I have zero filter.
Yeah.
It's like you do not want to start asking me these questions because you are not going to like the answer you're going to get.
Hmm. I think deep down, if they don't like it, it's because they know that something is wrong with what they're doing or how they're handling the situation.
Yeah, that's very true. Looking at
Hmm.
you, lawmakers. Looking at you.
Yeah. Okay, so last thing that I want to ask you about before I let you go, because I know you've got a lot of things going on right now. If there is anyone out there listening to this episode who is feeling like their mental health is like not where they want it to be, or they feel like there's been a recent decline because of everything that's been going on in the past however long, what words of wisdom would you give to that person?
Your feelings are valid no matter what because life is horrible right now. You are absolutely justified in feeling the way that you do. Everything's hard. But in order to cope, I found the best way is to take things 1 hour, or excuse me, one day, 1 hour, 1 minute at a time.
Hmm.
I mean, there's some days that I'm saddled in bed with depression and I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to lay here for another 5 minutes because this is where I feel safe. And then after 5 minutes passes, I can reevaluate. And usually, I stay in bed a lot longer than that. And then sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm going to get up and get a cup of coffee or something. But like breaking your life down into those manageable small chunks of time, that's the only way I've been able to get through it. Because
Yeah.
otherwise you're going to think about, oh, I need to make this drastic change in my life because I'm tired of feeling this way. And you're going to get overwhelmed and you're going to be worse off than you were before.
I
Be
feel
kind to
that.
yourself. You
Hmm.
have to give yourself grace because this is, any of this stuff, it's not easy to navigate. Even in the most ideal of circumstances, it's
Hmm.
not easy.
I love that. Thank you, Leah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, I feel so much better. Like, just like you're talking, I mean, you're talking straight to me right now. Everyone else will hear this in a few weeks, but it's like, oh, thank you. I needed that today.
I hope so. I was just thinking, it's like, man, I feel like I've gotten really off topic. But like, I think, everything, when people talk about intersectionality, everything intersects. Like,
Hmm.
that's just how it is. And you have to think about it.
Yeah. And you, not off topic at all. Everything is relevant. It all came back full circle. We got to everything that we needed to talk about. This is good.
Yeah.
So now, Leah, please, if people would like to follow you or get in touch with you or work with you, can you tell the people where they can find you online?
So you can find me on Instagram at Stevens Flute. You can always find me on Facebook. I'm usually just like speaking up about one thing or another. I will pop up on someone's feed. But yeah, send me a DM on Instagram. I'd love to connect with you. And we can go from there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leah. I really appreciate your time today. It was so nice to see you. Very nice to chat. This was great. And I appreciate your time very much.
I'm honored that you asked me to come on here and speak. So I hope that when people hear this in a few weeks, that it's going to help them.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you, Leah. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Bye. And just like that, May is a wrap, y'all. Let me know how you felt about a whole month of themed content. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, please drop me a line. You can always shoot me an email, tori@torilupinek.com. You could also put some comments in the Unclassical Musicians Facebook group. We're on there as well. If you haven't left a nice little review on Apple Podcasts yet, you could put something there too, but only if you're going to drop lots of stars, please. I think we're going to take 1 week off next week, just because, summer break. But we are going to have another series of themed content for you for the month of June, and that is going to be Musicians Who Podcast. Yay, featuring my own personal podcasting fairy godmother, Heidi K. Begay, host of the Flute 360 podcast, otherwise known as the very first flute podcast. She's been doing this for a long time, and she helped me get my podcast started. So I'm really excited for y'all to meet her because she's very important to me, and this podcast literally would not exist without her. And we're going to have some other great musicians who also have podcasts on the show in June. I'm really excited to get to talk to these people. Y'all know you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at Tori Lupinek Flutist. If you want to follow the show on Instagram, you're going to want to follow the hashtag The Unclassical Musician. And y'all keep the downloads coming, keep the positivity coming. I hope that this series on mental health awareness really spoke to you guys, and hope you found it helpful. I really personally found it helpful. Such a treat to get to actually talk to these people about this really important topic. And if you are a student, if you are graduating, congratulations, well done. It's been a hell of a year. Y'all did it. Y'all deserve all of the congrats. If you're a teacher and you made it through this year, also congratulations. Please take a break, an actual break, have a drink. Y'all deserve it. All right, and I'll see y'all back here in June on the Unclassical Musician. Bye now.